Sierra Uniform 593, this is Novokuznetsk area control. Please come in.
500 kilometers north of the Mongolian border, air traffic controllers in Novokuznetsk wait for Flight 593 to radio that it's left their control area.
Area control, please come in.
Less than 2 hours later, the first search party goes out to look for the Airbus in the frozen, rugged Siberian wilderness. They finally locate the remains of Flight 593 on a wooded hillside about 100 kilometers east of Novokuznetsk. It's soon clear there are no survivors among the 75 passengers and crew. This was a brand new aircraft, fitted with the latest technology. What could have brought it down? Why was there no warning, not even a distress signal? The Russian media are quick to speculate. Could it have been a terrorist bomb?
When I was in Moscow, the news we had that it could have been a terrorist act, because we had terrorist acts on aircraft previously. We was completely unaware, other than that nobody had survived it.
For some time, they wouldn't tell me anything specific. And only on the next day, the airline director told me there was no hope whatsoever. It was a horrible moment, of course. Horrible. It's hard to believe.
Aeroflot flies the families of the deceased out to Moscow. Among them is Brenda Clark, the mother of British passenger Mark Newport.
We met my daughter-in-law there. They've told us, you know, it's cordoned off, we can't go down there. And she said, you can go down there, Brenda, because the Chinese are down there. They have to do rituals and things, you know. And so she said they're down there. That's when I knew they'd lied to me and said that it's cordoned off. And that's when I told them, I want to go down, and if you don't take me down, then I thumb a lift.
The authorities take them to where the plane crashed. Relatives of Chinese victims drop pieces of paper with messages written on them. Others throw flowers.
Yeah, that was really moving. We had the flowers, they had the they wrote messages on, I think, on these pieces of paper, and they threw them out. It's lovely. Yeah.
The Russians take the families to a morgue in a town near the crash site, where the recovered bodies are being held. Many are too badly mutilated to be identified. They ask the families to look at recovered items of clothing to help identify the bodies. Brenda Clark finds her son's family photographs. It sends a chill through her. For the first time, she knows for certain he was on the flight. The recovery operation gets underway. The Russian government mobilizes 238 soldiers, police, investigators, and rescuers. Everyone in the aviation world wants to know how a brand new state-of-the-art Airbus could fall out of the sky without any warning. Does the A310 have problems no one knows about? They need to find out fast. Chief Accident Investigator Ivan Mashkivsky is in charge. The crash site itself offers few clues. The ones he does have are puzzling. Unbroken bottles of champagne, a flight attendant in an oxygen mask, and finally the body of at least one child thrown into the cockpit. The plane's digital flight data recorder indicates the engines were running when it hit the ground. He rules out engine failure. Mashkivsky needs the expertise of a man who knows the A310 well. Someone who can also recreate the fatal flight and find out what exactly went wrong. Vladimir Biryukov is an experienced test pilot and crash investigator at the Gromov Institute in Moscow. He's an expert on the A310 Airbus. Biryukov was directly involved in testing and certifying the aircraft prior to the Russians buying it.
Потому что судьба этого самолета, судьба этой компании.
Because of the fate of this plane, the fate of this airline, my first reaction was shock.
Поэтому, конечно, первый был шок, как
How could such a thing happen?
потому что обстоятельства первые были
All I
неизвестны
knew was that the plane had crashed somewhere over Siberia.
в районе Сибири, и все.
I remember spending a sleepless night, distraught, and trying to figure out what might have happened and what could have caused it.
В чем причина?
Yeah, come.
I think you should come and listen to this.
Each investigation begins with a complete analysis of the plane's cockpit voice recorder. This time, it reveals something disturbing.
No, come and sit in my seat. Would you like to? Come on.
Daddy, can I turn these?
Yeah.
Kudrinsky was in the pilot seat, wasn't he?
According to the diagram.
Can I turn this a bit?
Yeah, but if you turn it to the left, where will the plane go?
Left.
Right. Look out.
Again.
Can I turn this a bit?
Yeah, but if you turn it to the left, where will the plane go?
10 years ago, it wasn't unusual for people to be invited up to the cockpit. Of course, since 9/11, it's become a lot tighter, and you will find cockpit doors are locked generally throughout the flight.
Every country sets its own rules as to who has the authority or the access to the cockpit. In some countries, it's up to the captain, so the captain can invite guests up to the cockpit. But to have them actually manipulating the controls of an airplane, regardless of whether they have people on it or not, the fact that this was allowed to occur is definitely an exception in the industry.
Dad, can I go back to my seat?
The two investigators are stunned by what they hear on the cockpit voice recorder.
It's unbelievable. These two youngsters, the ones who we couldn't identify, they were not thrown into the cockpit by the crash. They were his kids.
And they were flying the plane.
The investigators are speechless. How could three experienced pilots allow children to fly a commercial airliner? They're about to learn something even worse. The children are only part of the problem. A little-known feature of the plane proved deadly.
Why is it turning?
Is it turning by itself?
Turning to the left. The other way. The other way. To the left now, to the right. The other way.
I am turning it left.
Okay, get out.
Get out! Get out! Get it left, the ground is right there!
Russian investigators listen to the cockpit voice recorder of an Aeroflot Airbus that has crashed in Siberia. What they hear makes their blood run cold.
Full throttle. Got it. Got full throttle. Full throttle, no!
Я хорошо понимаю психологически надо.
You should understand the frame of mind of the father. He is very proud of what he's doing. He invites his kids into the cockpit. Strictly speaking, it's a violation, of course. But I know such violations do occur in real life. I'm not condemning him or defending him here. What I'm trying to say is that no disaster occurs for just any single reason. There's always more than one, all coming together.
But this time, it really does look like a single cause. A child flying the plane. And it sends shockwaves through Aeroflot's higher echelons.
No, I think it would benefit them.
Investigators feel the pressure. The media has learned that Eldar was at the controls. Aeroflot, trying to improve on its Soviet-era image, wants to minimize the damage. Boris Rybak is an aerospace consultant in Moscow.
Aeroflot managers and executives indeed try to conceal results and try to downplay importance of this accident because it was very embarrassing.
Managers at Aeroflot aren't the only ones following the investigation. Airbus, the European company which made the plane, is also intensely interested.
Ivan Efremovich, what's wrong?
Nothing.
If the accident was caused by Eldar, it will vindicate Airbus. At the same time, grieving families are also clamoring for answers.
Are you sure?
For Mashkivsky and his team, it's a delicate balance.
There is always more than one reason for a plane to crash. We must find it.
I'll do my best.
His reputation, the reputation of Airbus, as well as Aeroflot, all now depends on finding this other cause.
This was an international flight. It was a Western-built aircraft, and it was inevitable that the investigation that would be conducted by the authorities and the inquiries that would be conducted by claimant lawyers would expose information.
At the same time, manufacturer of the aircraft, Airbus Industry, was very keen to get as much realistic explanation of what happened, because the reputation of this aircraft was at stake.
What I objected to was the way we was treated by Aeroflot after the accident. They wouldn't tell us anything what was going on. They denied everything. I wanted to know why my son died. I wanted to know why these men had been allowed to do such a thing. But all we got from Aeroflot was blank, blank, blank. Every time we tried to find something out, they just didn't want to know.
Families aren't the only ones desperate for answers. Vladimir Biryukov continues trying to learn all he can about why the Airbus fell out of the sky. Analyzing information from the flight data recorder, he can trace and repeat every command given to the aircraft during the flight.
We were trying to get as close to the truth as possible, to find the cause, because that was the precedent. The first foreign-produced plane to crash while flying for a Russian airline.
The investigation confirms the autopilot was on when the plane got into trouble. Even with the children in the cockpit, the plane should have flown on course. What went so terribly wrong?
So, any new developments?
We can discount Kudrinsky's daughter. She sat in the chair, but she didn't fly the plane. At 17:47 and 6 seconds, Captain Kudrinsky tells her not to touch the autopilot switch.
Her father gave the autopilot the command to turn, while Yana just rested her hands lightly on the controls.
It was you. You turned the plane.
But when Eldar took the controls, Biryukov discovers, something dramatically different happened. No one could possibly have guessed. Not even the 3 pilots in the cockpit. Biryukov may have found the key to the puzzle. The plane's flight data recorder shows that 2.5 minutes before the crash, while Eldar was at the controls, the autopilot partially disconnects. This is the start of all the plane's troubles. But how did that happen? The autopilot is a sophisticated computer which manages an aircraft's speed, altitude, and heading. Altitude and heading are controlled by 3 key functions. The rudder, which controls sideways movement. The elevators, which control vertical movement. And the ailerons, which are for turning. On Flight 593, the autopilot had disconnected itself from the ailerons.
And the autopilots that were used in transport airplanes years ago were an on-off. In today's sophisticated flight management systems, you can literally take fragments of the autopilot and disengage them, but not necessarily turn the switch off and turn it all off, unless you want to.
The question that really worries accident investigator Biryukov is how did the autopilot become partially disconnected? There's no mention of it in the cockpit voice recording. If this is a fault with the aircraft, it could prove fatal to future flights. The only way to know for certain is to reconstruct the accident on a flight simulator at Airbus Industries headquarters in Toulouse, France. Biryukov's experience as a test pilot and his detailed knowledge of the A310 is crucial to the investigation. Using information from the flight data recorder, Biryukov reconstructs the events, beginning at the moment Captain Kudrinsky allows his son to sit at the controls. A co-pilot will help replicate Piskarev's actions.
Look out to the left, watching for the ground when we're turning.
Unlike his sister, Eldar turns the wheel before his father can tell the autopilot to turn the plane. The controls are stiff because he's fighting the autopilot. In the simulator, Biryukov reproduces Eldar's every movement.
Now it's starting to go. Going. Going. There. Hold it long enough and it disconnects.
How long?
30 seconds. And it disconnects smoothly.
No warning.
No. No.
No one in the cockpit knows it, but this is a critical moment. Eldar's resistance actually turns part of the autopilot off. It takes just half a minute, but from here on, Eldar is controlling the ailerons. Eldar is actually steering the plane.
Why is it turning?
Is it turning by itself?
Yes, it is.
What seemed like an open and shut case is suddenly much more complex.
To the left, the back, the other way.
The 15-year-old flying the plane isn't the only reason they crashed. The discovery highlights an apparent flaw in how pilots are trained on the A310.
I got it, I have full throttle.
Accident investigator Vladimir Biryukov has finally discovered the terrifying sequence of events that made Aeroflot's Flight 593 fall to Earth. Captain Kudrinsky's 15-year-old son had turned the plane's control column against the programmed flight settings. This disconnected the autopilot without warning from the ailerons which turned the plane.
There. Hold it long enough and it disconnects.
How long?
The aircraft then began an uncontrolled turn to the right, which got steeper and steeper. But why didn't anyone realize the autopilot had disconnected?
Another peculiarity of the plane is that it has no alarm signaling the disengaging of the autopilot in the list channel. While our Russian planes have an alarm sounding in such an event. So I think that the captain allowed the boy to do it, irregular as it was, believing that even if the autopilot got disengaged, the crew would be alerted to the fact.
The A310 Airbus has only a small light to tell the crew the autopilot has disconnected. There's no alarm. And the Russian crew was obviously unaware of it. But there's also another reason why no one realized what was happening. The autopilot still appears to be working normally because it's controlling the plane's other functions. Although the plane is now banking, the situation isn't yet critical. At this point, if the crew takes the proper action, they can still stabilize the plane. Eldar is the first to notice that the artificial horizon is at an angle.
Why is it turning?
Is it turning by itself?
Yes, it is.
The three pilots don't understand this at all. After all, Kudrinsky returned the flight to its autopilot heading. Makarov offers an explanation.
Going into some kind of zone?
We've gone into a zone, a holding pattern.
Have we?
Of course we have.
Increasing 1 degree per second. 27 degrees. Now we should be entering into the zone.
What's that?
A strange arc now appears on the navigation panel. It looks like the course a plane would take circling an airport waiting to land.
There appeared an arc very much resembling the arc that appears on the display when a plane enters a waiting zone. There are waiting zones around airports. When too many planes accumulate, they enter such a zone and circle around while they wait. But there could be no such zone at that point on the route. And yet we hear in the voice recording, "Hey, we're entering a zone."
This false holding zone distracts the crew for 9 seconds. In that time, the plane crosses a critical threshold. The Airbus is now banking at 45 degrees, far beyond its design limits. It cannot turn this steeply and maintain height. It's now losing altitude.
Guys!
But the Airbus autopilot is no longer controlling the ailerons. Its other functions try to compensate by pulling the plane's nose up and increasing power to maintain altitude. Passengers are pushed back into their seats. It's on the verge of stalling. It starts to shake like a leaf.
Hold it! Just hold it!
Part of the flight control panel now goes dark. It's a warning sign that the plane has gone beyond its design limits. From here on, the Airbus is out of control. By recreating the fatal flight, Biryukov has worked out how a lapse in judgment and concentration has resulted in a catastrophic crisis. But could the crew have saved the plane and its passengers? The pilots of Flight 593 tried to bring the plane out of its fatal dive by pulling up, but they go too far. The plane climbs steeply and stalls.
We're losing altitude.
Now we've started to spin, so what do we do?
It's coming out of the corkscrew.
Now we're leveling out. In a moment, we'll come out of the dive.
All they had to do was let go. The plane has an inbuilt survival mechanism which won't allow it to stall, even at very low speed. But the pilot has to know that.
But the situation is totally new to them, something they weren't accustomed to handling. A stressful and incomprehensible situation. It would have taken special skills to act correctly in such a difficult situation. It was not the crew's fault, but their misfortune, because if a person doesn't know how to do something, because he was never taught to, you can't really blame him.
The team's perseverance in an open and honest investigation did show that there was more than one simple cause behind the accident. Their findings benefited the whole industry, especially the revelation that the autopilot can partially disconnect. This remains a feature of the A310, as it enables pilots to control certain elements of a flight while leaving the rest to the computer. But crews are now made aware of this. Captain Kudrynsky's misfortune is that it was triggered in a way that was unexpected and difficult to detect. The crash of the Russian plane comes at a troubling time for the airline industry. In 1994, the same year that Flight 593 went down, a series of crashes in the United States raised questions about how commercial pilots handle upsets, situations in which an aircraft finds itself in extreme flying conditions.
When we think about upset in a large airplane, we think about an attitude of the airplane that's beyond what normal flight regimes would be. That is, greater than 20 degrees nose up, greater than 10 degrees nose down, and bank angles greater than 25 degrees.
Within a year, the industry had begun offering pilots upset recovery training, teaching them skills to handle extreme situations like the one on Flight 593. The tragedy of one trip to Hong Kong may have contributed something to the safety of other passengers and crew. For parents and friends of those on board, though, what happened that night is never far from their minds. Adrian DeVille's body was one of 22 that were never identified. Their remains were cremated together by the Russian authorities.
In mine, he was asleep, and that's the way I deal with it, and, you know, he didn't know much about it.
The crew of the Airbus are buried in Mitinskoye Cemetery in Moscow, in a hero's grave, next to the firefighters who died at the Chernobyl nuclear plant. Yana and Eldar lie next to their father.
представляю. Ну, может, не до конца, конечно, но я могу себе представить.
I can imagine the horror they experienced in their last moments. He knew there were not only all those people depending on him,
Определенное количество людей, но
but also his own kids.
Да, нарушение. Да, допустил.
Yes, it was a violation. Yes, he did it. But how it all happened, it was just a freak accident, a bizarre coincidence.
Вы знаете, что
I can forgive the pilot. I can forgive the children because they were innocent. This man was 39 years old, and for those 39 years he had an exemplary flying career. He had a family, he was proud of them, and it was the final 5 minutes of those 39 years that went awry.
Yeah, children shouldn't have been allowed in the cockpit, I don't believe, but me saying that now won't bring Mark back, will it? But it might stop things happening in the future.